Hey everybody! So today we're going to talk about Pallas, or Pallas Athene, or Athena, depending on what mythology you look at. When you pull her in a natal chart, she'll be pulled under Pallas. I'm not going to go into her mythology all the way because there's a lot. Feel free to look it up, but I will say that depending on what mythology you read, her origin story is a little different. Either in some of them she has a mother, but Zeus swallowed her, and in some versions she doesn't have a mother. But what seems to be pretty consistent through all of them is that she was born, she came to be springing from Zeus's head, kind of like he manifested her, if you will. I mean, that's not really what they say in the mythology, but that's kind of how I think of it, because Pallas deals a lot with manifesting your own reality. She actually does, like magical will of manifesting your own reality. She really does. She has a lot to do with that. So it makes sense to me that in her mythology she would spring from Zeus's head, and that's how she was born. I'll show you what she looks like when you pull her in a natal chart. I'll use mine just because I have the right to do that. Okay, so you'll notice right under the glyph for Saturn, there's something that looks like a diamond with a cross. That is Pallas. So that's what maybe it won't look like mine exactly, my chart, but that's what the glyph will look like when you pull her. So you know that you're pulling the right thing. And Pallas so you want to look and see what's going on with Pallas in the natal chart, right? Pallas can show, like I mentioned, manifesting your own reality, willing it to be, if you will. She definitely deals with that. She also deals with creative visualization and creative intelligence. Absolutely. Now, mind you, all of these things that I'm going to say, it really depends on what's going on in your natal chart as to how this plays out. Because while Pallas does represent these things, right? She represents creative intelligence, creative manifestation. She represents these things. She also represents wisdom. You know, if you've got Pallas and Pallas makes a whole bunch of really challenging aspects in your chart, there might be some issues with these things. If she makes a bunch of easy aspects, there might be ease with these things. But then, you know, in some charts, the challenges are what spur on, challenges, squares and oppositions in the chart. There is tension or like a back and forth, but respectively in each case. But sometimes that's what's needed to actually creatively manifest or use your creative intelligence or your wisdom, So it really does depend on the whole chart as to how exactly that plays out. But she does deal with themes like that. She also deals with themes having to do with, Pallas was a female who was able to play ball with men in a man's world. She was able to do this. So sometimes with Pallas, you'll find somebody, and really this would be like a person with a strong Pallas, I would think. You could find somebody who, because in mythology Pallas had to kind of put her feminine side to the side so she could play ball in a man's world. You might find, if you got a female with a strong Pallas, you might find that she embraces more masculine qualities and maybe doesn't embrace as much of the feminine part of her. That doesn't always have to be the case, but it certainly can come into play. Father issues can certainly come into play with Pallas, because Pallas came from She was born from Zeus. So there can definitely be there can definitely be daddy issues with the Pallas, or even like revering the father. Whether or not that's actually warranted is a whole other thing. You know, but those kinds of things can also come up with Pallas. Really, Pallas to me wants to be able to blend the masculine and the feminine. I really do think that's what Pallas wants to be able to do. Because this was a female who was more masculine, but she was a female. So I think there is a blending that ultimately Pallas wants, to be able to blend the masculine and the feminine together, which does make her a little bit more androgynous. I may not have pronounced that right. But really with Pallas, neither end of things should get neglected. Sometimes women that have a strong Pallas, and I would say a strong Pallas would be somebody who had like Pallas conjunct a natal planet, Pallas in one of the angular houses, Pallas conjunct one of the major angles, you know, something like that. You might have a Pallas woman who kind of, it could happen this way. This is not, neither of these examples will be universal, but you might have a woman who, or somebody who identifies as female who kind of doesn't really fuck with the female side of them, and they let but they embrace the masculine side of themselves. Same thing with a man, or somebody who feels, you know, who identifies as man. They might be the opposite. They might really embrace the feminine, but not embrace the masculine parts of themselves, or have difficulty doing that. Neither of those are universal, but I would definitely, if you've got like a strong Pallas in your chart, I would definitely take a look and see if any of those themes might fit. For sure. Politics is another thing, and diplomacy. She can sometimes show a flavor for politics, or a flavor for being diplomatic. And, you know, with this, when you're looking at Pallas, you want to look and see where the planetary ruler of the sign that Pallas is in, where it is in your chart, and if it's making an aspect to Pallas. Like, I'll show you. Okay, so in my chart, I've got Pallas in Sagittarius. Pallas is in the first house in Sagittarius, and it trines Jupiter in the fourth. So it does make an aspect. It does make a harmonious aspect, which, on the surface of things anyway, might make it seem like Pallas maybe functions harmoniously in my chart, has a more harmonious way of functioning. If that Jupiter was in Pisces and squaring Pallas, that might show that there was more challenge with Pallas. So definitely look at where the planetary ruler of Pallas falls in your chart and see if it makes any aspects to Pallas. If it doesn't make any aspects to Pallas, then I would consider it kind of a neutral thing. It doesn't. That's another way that you could tell if you have a strong Pallas too, or a strong any goddess asteroid. If the planetary ruler of the sign that the goddess asteroid is in, if it happens to make an aspect to that planetary ruler, that can also show a strong Pallas, or a strong Juno, or a strong Ceres, or a strong Vesta, or whatever. That can be another way to see strength there. Something else with Pallas, that's a big deal. Strategy and patterns. Both of these can show, both of these themes can come up with Pallas too. Pallas was very strategic, so Pallas can show that in the chart, and details, or not details. Well, yeah, I guess depending on where Pallas is, I guess it could be. But connecting dots, patterns. This is a big deal with Pallas. And depending on where Pallas is in the chart, you know, could give you an idea as to how you do that. Like, I think I said details earlier because I think about an example with like Pallas and Virgo. If you've got Pallas and Virgo, you depending on what else Pallas is doing in the chart, there might be something about seeing patterns and details in the details. You got Pallas and Sagittarius like me, maybe you see patterns or connect the dots in a bigger way, or in a more, you know, it's not detail focused. It's more big picture focused. So yeah, you would definitely want to look at that, because I do find that patterns play in quite a bit. People with a strong Pallas tend to be good at connecting dots with patterns, or connecting they tend to be good with that in some way. Anyway, I think this is pretty good. Definitely pull her in your chart. If you want to leave comments or anything about where it is in your chart and how you feel about it, let me know. I'd be curious to hear. I might get going. But if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck with Astrology. I am at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Aberturno Astrology on Instagram. If you want to like or subscribe or whatever the fuck people do with videos on YouTube, you can find us by searching for Let's Fuck with Astrology in the YouTube search bar. If you do the Reddit thing, come join us on the subreddit Let's Fuck with Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.